Hey,
Hey, Thomas.
how's it going, my friend?
I'm doing well. How are you doing?
I am doing fantastic. As you can see behind me, it's not what you guys saw last week with the cool, profiling and criminal true crime stuff behind me. I am on the road doing all the work that we need to do, having a little fun in the meantime. I've been all over the place. I'm in Florida now, which is funny, being in a show called Profiled. Some of the biggest names in the historical part of serial killers and profiling and all that here in Florida has, Ted Bundy, Eileen Wuornos, then Danny Rawling. If you don't know what Danny Rawling is, he was the Gainesville Ripper, the inspiration for one of your favorite horror movies, Scream. That all occurred. I'm somewhere on the Gulf of America.
Looks like it's very nice there. It looks like you're doing the background's nice. You got a pool behind you, and I hope you're enjoying yourself.
Yeah, I think after the show, I think I'm going to take a dive in or something, just to celebrate our second episode here on All Access Network Television. I'm excited about this one because this is a real breakdown of, the criminal mind, how they put the categories. It's just the serial killer type. And I'm excited for that. Hopefully the signal stays good, because I'm not used to Wi-Fi here in this location, our private location, of course. So you'll hear birds and everything coming through.
Actually, you got a little bit of skipping starting right now, but hopefully it'll subside a little bit. But
yeah, hopefully it does. Hopefully nobody misses anything. Again, like I said, this is kind of chronological as we go through in these first few episodes. If you missed the first one, that was the history of how profiling came about. This one's going to be a breakdown of all the categories.
All righty. And congratulations on your second show.
Yeah, thanks. And just so you know, always want to thank my management, Methodical Management Asia, and my promoter, Adam Began at Historically Haunted. Most of all Access Network Television. So our big network here. Make sure you support them. Subscribe, of course, to YouTube. If you're not watching on YouTube right now, make sure you subscribe. So that's very important. Again, we're around here every Thursday, unless something comes up at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time to bring you the Profiled. But with no further ado, my friend, let us zoom in and uncover the criminal mind. All right, my friends. So again, thank you guys for tuning in. Again, like I said before, if you have any questions, make sure you put them in all caps so Sean could give those to me at the end of the episode. And also, I know a lot of people out there, you might want to say hi, anything like that. I appreciate all that. I will acknowledge you. It's just we're going to go through all this stuff. We want to try and get through it. I will acknowledge you at the end of the show. I'm going to go back in the show notes. Make sure I say hi to you. I appreciate you guys all watching. But here we go, my friends. So again, this week, it's the mind shadow, decoding the serial killer types. So it's very important as we break this down, why they might do what they do. That it's always the big question. Why do they do it? Is it the need for power, a twisted mission, or is it something purely biological? So we have to really get down to that. First off, a lot of people, I know some of this is new to people, some of it's not. So hang in there. We're going to try and make sure we pretend that nobody knows about this stuff as we learn it. So, of course, defining the term, clarifying the FBI's definition of serial killer is very important. It's 3 or more killings with a cooling off period. So that way we distinguish them from, being a spree killer, which of course is just going on a spree with no rest in between, or a mass murder where people hurt people all in like one setting. So we want to differentiate away from that as we're talking about the serial killer mind. But the two main types, there's two main types that we're going to get into. And it's going to break down from there, which is very important. Again, as we have to really look at this, as the weeks go on and we learn more and more and becomes more immersive, as you guys get into the mindset to be able to look at this stuff in a different vision, more of a 360 view instead of what you might have seen on TV or in a movie, what you read in a book. I'm going to try and help you apply it. So that way it'll help you in your own life and what to look out for and how to keep yourself safe. So two main types, classic, and there's spree serial murders. Okay. Now the classic is one that we hear about a lot. It's the basic stalking and is often sexually driven. So that's the ones that we hear about a lot. And there's also the spree serial murder, not to be confused, like I said before, spree killing, but spree more leading to led by a thrill seeking or control. So we put all those together and we're going to want to break those down. So another thing is there's always been a lot of questions. I've always had a lot of questions about, you know, who's a serial killer, who may not be. There is that fuzzy in between that we get. What a lot of people are wondering, the people that may assassinate people, the murder for hires, your gangsters, cult hitmen, you know, cult mentality, like I said. Those are the ones we have to try and distinguish. And we'll get into all that as the episodes go on. But first off, we want to look at organized and disorganized types of serial killers. That dichotomy really was credited to the late pioneer of the FBI, profiler Roy Hazelwood. So how it's broken down is we have the organized killer. So the organized killer, how we're going to look at that is more of the high intelligence, socially competent, plans meticulously. He follows the media coverage, so always wants to see what's going on, try and have that one up, or just to be able to mess with the media or anybody looking into them. Probably some best examples of that is Ted Bundy, all right, Dennis Rader, the BTK killer, and John Wayne Gacy. The reason why I say Ted Bundy, a higher intelligence. All three of them are of higher intelligence, but more planning. They knew exactly what they were going to do and how they were going to do it. But if you really look into those, and we're going to break all these down, will be single episodes of Bundy, of Rader, of John Wayne Gacy, some of the bigger ones, but they are considered that organized type killer who really has things, you know, going in the right direction for them in planning it out, and that type of stalking, and you know, not really leaving really many clues behind either. So they were very tough to catch. It was basically mistakes that brought them down. The other side of it is our disorganized killer. That's a lower IQ. And again, we talked about this last week. I think, you know, a lot of people think serial killers are these masterminds, but a lot of them tested IQ-wise when they were captured. Majority of them are a 90 or less IQ, okay? And that's a big thing, you know, when it comes to that. So we don't want to be thinking that they're all masterminds, but they're just like anybody else out there. There's going to be some smart ones, but a majority of the time they're not so smart, which is good, because hopefully, you know, they make those mistakes and we capture them. But the disorganized killer, a lower IQ, they're more impulsive. They leave the evidence, socially awkward, more of that sociopath type thing. Some of the examples, of course, you're going to look at is Richard Chase, who was the vampire of Sacramento. And there was also Herbert Mullen. He was the guy who believed if he didn't kill people, he was trying to avoid California from having a major earthquake, and he thought killing people would help that avoid. Funny thing is when he was captured, I think it was a few weeks after he was captured, they actually had a huge earthquake. So I don't know, sometimes these guys, crazy things that happen. But believe it or not, Jack the Ripper is considered disorganized, because a lot of times he just left things the way they were. That evidence was wide open. And a lot of these people that are disorganized tend to have schizophrenic type of behaviors and all that. In case in point, Richard Chase, being the vampire of Sacramento, he believed his blood was turning into powder, so that's why he had to, you know, drink blood of his victims and those types of things. Again, with Herbert Mullen and the Jack the Ripper, the prime suspect was Aaron Kosminski. You know, we're saying schizophrenic. Aaron Kosminski was picked up and brought to an institution where he died in 1919. He stayed there the rest of his life. Funny thing is the day that he was picked up, all the Jack the Ripper stuff stopped. And of course, his DNA or mitochondrial DNA was found twisted in with Edo's dress that they tested recently. So that's another thing with disorganized, organized, disorganized. But a lot of people don't know there's another kind of category is the mixed category where it could be both. How that starts off, a lot of people start off disorganized and they develop that pattern to go more organized. They acknowledge that, you know, in real life, things are messy. And many of these killers evolve from the disorganized to organized and as they perfect their craft. Some of the examples of that, of course, Jeffrey Dahmer really had a lot of issues at first, but he was really figured things out for himself. But again, of course, you know, we thank God that things happen, and I feel bad for the victims of beforehand, but making those mistakes and figuring out what he did. Another one is Ed Kemper, the co-ed killer. Started off disorganized and became more organized. Same thing with Eileen Wuornos. You know, they do have high intelligence, but they're acting on impulse. Organized maybe plan abductions, but they leave messy scenes. So that's that mixed category that's important that we know. So it's getting a little darker out. Hopefully I get the lights on here. So, but one of the bigger ones that we have is the categories as we break them down. This is probably one of the most important parts because this is the nitty gritty of what we're talking about tonight. How we're going to break down all the different types of serial killers, what their motives are, what possibly makes them up from what they do, what their mindsets are, why they do what they do, of course. So that's the important part. So the one I want to cover first, this is the one that really Hollywood jumps on. Hollywood really jumps on this one because of how it breaks down. It's that visionary serial killer. The visionary is the ones that have that psychotic break. They're driven by hallucinations or voices. Often the demons or God, typically they're suffering from a break in reality. A lot of their motives are just obedience to the perceived higher power or external entity. A lot of their characteristics are often disorganized. They not usually plan their crimes or select victims. Usually the victims are chosen, or those traits are based on the voice that dictates it in their head. So that's what's kind of sad. The reason why I think Hollywood jumps on this, like movies like Seven, all the 7 deadly sins, something's telling them to do that in the name of God or any of those types of things. So I think Hollywood thinks that's the one that most people are going to latch onto. Some of the historical people that were considered visionary killers that were hearing voices to do things, probably most famously David Berkowitz, son of Sam. Sam being the next door neighbor's dog, was telling him that he needed to do what he did. And of course, again, like we talked about earlier, Herbert Mullins, that there was a voice telling him that he needed to kill to prevent earthquakes. So it was the voice driving them, that inner demon of themselves, or that psychotic break, how they disassociate and let something take over. That's where I think a lot of times on my side of the paranormal, on side of true crime, where it blurs, is some of these people, when they disassociate, there is the mental break there, or they disassociate because something's taken over. So that's the big battle, how we talk about that. You never know. So it gets crazy. But from there, another big ones is similar to visionary. It's more mission oriented. They want to rid the world of something. They feel they need to rid the world of certain things. Like they target specific groups they deem undesirable, like sex workers, specific ethnicities. They believe to have a duty to rid society of a specific group deemed undesirable, certain professions, religions, lifestyles. Their motive is basically justification and social cleansing. God forbid, a lot of that, in a way, happens on social media already. Some people feel like they have to get rid of people because they don't agree with them. I think a lot of that's going on in our country right now. But if you want to break it down serial killer wise, there's a lot of the characteristics are often very organized and efficient. Unlike visionary, they are not psychotic. You know, these are grown things. People are taught prejudice as we grow up, or not to appreciate other people or have empathy, but they simply have a deep held and albeit violent prejudices. And one of those historic ones of this mission oriented historically is Joseph Paul Franklin. So he targeted interracial couples, Jewish and Black individuals back in 1977 to 1980. So he was doing that type of thing. The reason why I look at this on a whole, if you're attacking, you know, and things that you felt needed to be cleansed on a whole, as we look back, World War II, Adolf Hitler, how he got almost a whole nation of Nazis to know they wanted to rid the world of the Jewish people. So that's like a big one on a whole, or, you know, we're talking about individuals now, but things could go larger like that. And again, even as I talk about, you know, social media and all that, you get enough people on one side to hate another side, or just here in our country, that division creates this type of person too. Psychologically, as we grow up, the more information you have, the more people teach each other that they don't like this person for whatever reason it is, and create that violence and all that. So it's almost like mission oriented is almost like in a whole. It's almost like groups maybe come down to individuals, but sometimes those groups create those individuals to do these things. So we really got to be careful of what we put out there on social media. A lot of the hate that goes out there, getting these people that, you know, their minds grab onto that, and that builds up like a pressure cooker, and these types of things could happen. So that one's a really dangerous one. I think that's really social media nowadays is what really pushes that mission-oriented type killer. Probably one of the biggest ones, that's going to be the hedonistic. That's your pleasure person, and that really breaks down to even to more categories. This is one we'll probably spend a little bit more time with, kind of hit at it. This is a majority of it. You know, this is the largest category that we're going to talk about. Of course, it's the most common. It's, you know, subdivided into other categories of the pleasure. It's the lust killer, the thrill kill, and the comfort and financial gain killer. All right. So the lust killer, of course, is the sexual gratification. Again, when we talked about history last week, a lot of the reasons why the BSU, the Behavioral Science Unit, or profiling really got into the nitty gritty is because of the influx of sexually oriented murders. So that's one of the big ones, that lust killer. But the thrill killer, that's the rush of the kill. You know, it's almost like they get a rush from it. It's a drug to them once they kill, in that addiction of doing that. You know, the comfort gain killer, it's more of a materialistic reward. So basically killing to get some kind of reward, or, you know, getting people to these insurance fraud and those types of things. And the list goes on with that. But historically, we're going to look at this. So let's look at some of our historic serial killers and how they line up in this hedonistic pleasure serial killer point, in all the lust, thrill, comfort, gain killers and all that. So historically, one of the big names for the lust killer would, of course, be Jeffrey Dahmer. So he wanted that sexual gratification and all that he was yearning for, especially from a young age, all the way up until adulthood and all that. And it turned into other things on top of that, you know, having lustful and keeping, you know, some of these bodies around. And again, so desperate to keep them that he cannibalized them, I think, thinking the DNA, they would stay with him. So he had that lust and just wanted to maintain it. Probably one of the biggest thrill killers, Robert Hansen, the baker butcher up in Canada. What he used to do is he would capture people, put them on his plane, and he'd fly them out in the middle of nowhere, dump them off and say, start running. And then he would hunt them down. That was his thrill, was to hunt down human beings as animals. And, you know, luckily he was caught. And a lot of these killers we're talking about, they make the movies about them, or they become characters. Because I know there was a season of Dexter where one of the serial killers, you know, after Dexter was over, when he like had his rebirth, when he was up in the middle of Maine, I think it was, or New York. And the main serial killer was a guy doing that. He was hunting the particular women down with, like they were prey. So that's a thrill killer example. And probably one of the biggest names as a comfort gain killer for materialistic reward, of course. The one that a lot of people say is the first known killer or serial killer here in the U.S., H.H. Holmes. So, of course, he was killing people for that insurance reward, getting that money, all that money that he used to make sure that he gained, getting that hotel that he was setting up and all those types of things. And, there's a lot behind it. Of course, we'll talk more about H.H. Holmes down the road once we get through all of our different things as we go on these first few weeks. Of course, we're going to learn more and more. But the primary gratification is to complete life or death control over another human. We got the godlike complex of deciding who lives and dies. That's the power and control, the dominance type of killer. So they are motivated by, of course, dominating or having authority, almost like that. If they're messed up, that's almost like I really look at it as the type of killers that you might get with that. People like Ed Kemper, the life or death, having power over people. It's very narcissistic. I think a lot more narcissists probably fall into that category if they become killers, if they have those other antisocial behaviors, which of course we're going to get into the psychiatry probably next week and what different psychological types of things affect people, how they affect the mind. We'll get into all that. But historically, it's the killing. They often prolong it. They frequently engage in a process-led crimes where they have to have a process almost, which of course is heir apparent with people like Dennis Rader, the BTK killer. He had a certain way of doing things, and that got him to his gratification. Crimes were torture, psychological terror, and the main event was more to their gratification than the kill itself. Another type of person like that, Harold Shipman, probably one of the most prolific serial killers. He was a doctor. He held life or death in people's hands. He was deciding who lived or died, that godlike complex. So that was like a big one in those aspects. So there's a lot of big categories. Again, we're going to cover a little bit more here, but let's the hedonistic subtypes. I just want to get into that just maybe a little bit more, just to get down to that. Your lust killer. It's important that we kind of understand a little bit more how we break all this stuff down to really pinpoint in on what we're dealing with, what we're looking against, how to keep ourselves safe, what to identify mainly in people around us. And mainly as kids are growing up, what they're exposed to and what we see. But the lust killer, it's more on the paraphilias and all that, pedophiles, those types of things, that lust for what sometimes when they're growing up, what they can't have, they want to garner that control. So, why the crime is intrinsically, it's always linked to a sexual kind of gratification, is what their motivation is. But, you got the comfort killer. That's often, your black widows. We're going to get into women serial killers. Your bluebeards. The motivation is just purely pragmatic, if that's a good word to use. It's more of money, insurance, inheritance, what people might do to their own families to garner money. And over time, as it passes. And again, remember, serial killers, it's, 3 or more killings with a cooling off period. But sometimes that happens. One family member goes and somebody else does something to somebody else. And some of these, women we'll get into and talk about them in a minute. But the thrill killer, of course, it's all about the adrenaline. Remember, once the victim is dead, it's like the high is gone. It's leading, that'll lead to shorter cooling off periods. So a lot of times, it's a thrill killer. If we're looking at evidence and let's say something happens, then there's a time period, but then it starts happening closer and closer. We might be able to know with a pattern that it might be a thrill type killer that we're looking at, just by looking at the evidence. And of course, the next few weeks we'll be talking about taking a look at the crime scene and how to figure out MOs and what the psychological part of it is, what they leave behind, what type of clues we're looking at, how to put together a profile by looking at how this person and how the victim lived too. And we're going to get into all that. But mainly here, we're going to get into the female serial killers. All right. Is that an exception to the rule? You know, a lot of it is there is like some differences that we look at. Some are very much alike. Like Eileen Wuornos was very, you know, they all thought that a man was doing this for a while until they figured that out, because it just didn't make sense of the violence of it. You know, women are less violent. It's more of an emotional thing. It's sometimes, fortunately, it's a financial gain too. It's trying to regain some dominance in a relationship. But you know, briefly address how female topologies, they often differ. They frequently women frequently fall into that comfort kill, like we saw, the financial gain, or the angel of death, where a lot of these people were more nannies. They were nurses, the medical field, medical doctors. Even then, you know, compared to the male-dominated, more male domination comes with the lust and power categories. So historically, we'll look at a few of the females here. But you got that comfort gain historically. I don't know if you guys ever heard of her. Hopefully we'll talk about her more. Nanny Doss. She was called the Giggling Granny. This is the one. She killed multiple husbands to gain money, and actually family members, insurance fraud, actually killing grandkids and her own like sisters and stuff like that. This woman was nuts. And the reason why they call her the Giggling Granny is every time they brought up and they had her dead to rights, and they started talking about, you know, the murders that she was, you know, up on, she would just giggle at them. So she would laugh and kind of giggle, and it was really freaky, from what, you know, a lot of the people that interviewed her said. Probably another big one a lot of people don't know about is Belle Guinness. So she came over here. A lot of people nicknamed her Hell's Belle. You know, she was married at first, and she was gaining a lot of this insurance money. So she had her own farm, okay, and she was looking for male companionship, more because she wanted to probably murder them all. But she put an ad out, you know, that she was looking for somebody to marry her. So people would come out, these men, stay with her for a little while, then of course they go missing, and the families didn't know. But you know, just trying to get the insurance money. The crazy thing is when one of these families, you know, you can only go so long where you finally catches up to you. But the one of the families had the police go out there, and she kind of found out that something was going on. So somehow miraculously the farm caught on fire, which is probably another insurance fraud for her. But they found a body in there, and they assumed that this body was decapitated. They assumed it was Belle Guinness. But there is speculation that she might have set this up and disappeared into the wind. And the body that they found might have been another, like a female victim she might have took at the time, and covered up to make it look like it was her. So that's like a crazy, crazy type of thing that she set up. And if she did get away with it, that is even nuts, because nobody ever heard from her ever again. But even back then, it was a little easier to hide back in those early 1900 days and all that. But the other big one is, you know, your angel of death. So the angel of death ones that goes far back. One of the biggest name ones that, you know, I remember studying up on and reading up on and all that was Jane Topin. They called her Jolly Jane. She's been featured on a lot of different shows of talking about this type of topic. So she was more like, you know, kind of like a nanny nurse. She would go and take care of families. So she would be taking care of these families, but then she'd be poisoning them so they'd be sick, so she could take care of them a little bit more. But little did they know, when they did finally catch up to her, she made them sick on purpose, because as they were dying, she had a sexual fetish to lay in bed with these people as they were dying and watch them die was her sexual fetish. So that one is like crazy right there. But that's the one you guys could look into quite a bit. And probably one of the other ones, more up to date now, it's Kristen Gilbert. So she was a nurse, of course, turned killer. She was on duty at her hospital when she took her job up to the point she was captured. She was on duty for half of the 350 deaths at this hospital that she was started to work at. One of the things that she would do once they found out, she would inject a non-traceable adrenaline and then perform CPR on them to try and be a hero. So it was almost like a hero complex that she tried to bring them back. So it was almost like she wanted to save them, but look like the hero. But of course, a lot of them, of course, they're going to die. You know, it doesn't always work, CPR, and especially on their health situations and all that. But she was doing this quite a bit, as it says, you know, half the deaths she was on duty for. But when they did catch up to her, she was only convicted of 4 murders and, of course, 2 attempted murders and all. So, you know, that's the big part of that. But really, let's break it down a little bit more. Let's close this up, and you know, we're going to start taking questions in a little bit. But really, if you put it all together, when we look at how all this stuff breaks down over time, all the different categories, and we look at, you know, childhood, there's always that debate, nature versus nurture, and how a lot of this stuff happens. You know, the old saying, oh, they played too many video games, they were looking at too many magazines, or, you know, especially nowadays, we got so much information on the internet. You know, go back to that, you know, mission-oriented, the hate groups and all that, and how some people could cause that online if we're not keeping watch on our kids and what they're getting into, that type of typology and all that. But the nature versus nurture is just, you know, a quick thought, like I said, with children. And a lot of times when these children were trying to break down, you know, with serial killers as they were interviewed over time, a lot of them had similarities, things that we could look out for potentially to help our kids, not until, you know, what they're watching and all that. Of course, it's hard, not easy being a parent, of course. You know, sometimes, unfortunately, some people overparent and they underparent. You're trying to find that fine line. If somebody had a book on being successful, it'd be great. It'd be a bestseller, but, you know, we all make our mistakes and all that, but at least we could communicate with our children, especially, and keep an eye on things and get them the help that they need if they do need it. We just have to keep an eye on them, especially our teachers and schools, our neighbors, all those types of things. It takes a village. But the nature versus nurture debate, you know, in a quick touch, a lot of people know the McDonald triad. You know, the neurobiology of the McDonald triad is what they say. A lot of these serial killers all have in common that when they were younger, they wet the bed up to an older age. A lot of them have the obsession with fire, the pyromania, and of course the cruelty to animals. So there's a lot of that going on. So you really look at it on that aspect. Those are the things we have to keep an eye on. You know, if that kid's wetting the bed longer than usual, doesn't necessarily mean they're going to become a serial killer, but it's still something that you might want to, you know, have somebody take a look at, a psychologist or anything like that, just to see what's going on. Because sometimes, you know, people wet the bed like that, or another thing is they stop bathing. Those are the other things we have to look out for, because, you know, some of these kids are being sexually abused, maybe by family members outside the main family, just a neighbor or anything like that. Those are clues to look at. Something traumatic happened and we have to get them on the right path. So it's a big thing that happens to a lot of these people to get into these categories. But you know, you got to understand these types. Again, it isn't about glorifying the serial killer. Again, it's about preventing and profiling for the right reasons. You know, again, it's not just profiling, you know, the serial killer. Sometimes we have to profile the victims and see why they're being attacked, or how to hold that off, and how to learn from what we're talking about in these next few weeks, how to keep yourself protected and all that. So, and you know, we just want to get to that. So what we'll do is we got some time left and all that, and I want to be able to answer some questions. So let's bring Sean back up. Let's talk a little bit more, break down some of what we saw. But Sean, did you have any questions yourself at all? So I know you were watching.
I was kind of curious, is the fact, has there ever been a spontaneous serial killer that just kills in a snap at random?
Well, I think, what we were talking about as we break it down, there is the potential for that. You could have trauma happen in your life and nothing happens, but all of a sudden there's that catalyst, that one thing that finally breaks you and all that. But it could be that psychotic break that we talked about earlier as we were breaking all this down. A psychotic break could happen at any time and turn you into a serial killer on a split second. None of us are immune to it. We've all had trauma growing up. All these people have had trauma, but there's that pattern. There's that one thing, that catalyst that breaks us. That psychotic break.
But what I'm saying, after that psychotic break, is there anybody just been a spontaneous, just at a whim, just grab somebody and kill them and go on?
I don't know if that would really break down for serial killer per se. That's, I don't say it's mass, it's not many, but more of that spree,
because it would come
type of thing.
It would come from their trauma and stuff that would cause that.
Yeah, it is. We look at the criminal mind, or we look at the mind of just us as human beings and all that, those things that break us. Again, I'll go back to our youth and all that. And this is one thing I talk about a lot. I've talked about a lot on shows. Nobody's perfect growing up, how we give people information and all this other stuff. I know there's a thing with a lot of the newer generation that all the kids got trophies, they got ribbons, all that. These kids at a young age, when they needed to learn, weren't learning how to lose.
Exactly. Right? I do agree.
And then they get older, and then, they don't do that stuff when you get a job or you get into other types of things, where into high school or something like that. There's been cases where somebody spontaneously killed their girlfriend or one they wanted to go to the prom with. They didn't know how to handle it. We're not giving our kids the tools to be able to handle rejection, those types of things. It really goes back to that nature nurture, how we raise our kids, and what could happen with that, that spontaneous type of kill or anything like that. More of that spree, spree could be like one person or whatever. It's just that spur of the moment where things just finally go haywire, or that mission oriented, where if somebody online nowadays, you build up enough hate and somebody finally says, "Oh, I hate those people. I'm just going to go, kill somebody." Spur of the moment. But a lot of times that happens in spur of the moment is husbands and wives. The husband pisses off the wife pisses off the husband, and they love each other, but God forbid something just snaps and, they just can't take, I found out my wife was cheating, and that's a spontaneity too. What knows what stems from that? Sometimes somebody kills once and they get a taste for it, and they build up that anger again. So really, there's a lot of different categories to it. But yeah, there is the possibility of that. Sure.
Oh, interesting. I know you kind of highlighted this a little bit. Christine Marie asked this. It's wild how little women serial killers. I wonder if it's just they haven't been caught. But you kind of briefly talked about women serial killers.
Really, a lot of it's such a small percentage. I just think naturally from the beginning of time, from cavemen and all that, they were more of the violent oriented. There's more violence with that masculine type of part of them. Is there masculinity in some women? Yes. Sometimes women take on that masculinity because men take it away from. They take away the femininity and turn them into masculine from trauma and abuse. So that is like somebody like Eileen Wuornos, that was her femininity was taken away, and she had more of that masculine side, which made them wonder when all those murders were happening if it was a guy, and it ended up being her. So that's that gave her more time to kill, because it's so hard to pinpoint. You have patterns, you don't know the fingerprint of why these people do their upbringing until you actually capture them, interview them, and hopefully down the road we'll have a little bit more knowledge where we could pinpoint these people, as I talked about in the history, how they're getting more and more with science to be able to hopefully figure out these crimes before they get out of hand or too far into it. Hopefully, they don't have the 3 kills and become a serial killer, more of that 1 or 2, hopefully none at all. But it's so hard, I just think, just like the paranormal, we'll never be able to prove it scientifically or any way like that, because there's no way we could keep repeating the same thing over and over again, like in the paranormal, but also in the mind of a criminal. We don't know every little thing that happened in that person's life and what triggered them to do what they did. There's
Right.
patterns to it, but we'll never know exactly. And that's why it makes it very difficult to find these people. Usually we find them because we find them after the fact. We don't find these people beforehand. And the only way we could prevent it from beforehand is, a lot like we see online. There's so much hatred online, and it pushes
Mhm.
people to become that mission-oriented killer or have that psychotic break because somebody keeps blasting them over and over again, and they have that psychotic break and they turn them into these people. That nature versus nurture again. What do people do to each other? That bullying, the trauma, whatever they have going home. So a lot of that is going to occur. How do we avoid it? We have to be more mindful of that. We have to make sure that people don't look at getting psychological help as a stigma or anything like that. They have to get that help. If there's that little thing, if something happens, to get that help, talk it through, or have other types of things that help trauma and all. And different methods. There's all kinds of different methods to help out. It isn't just talk trauma. Some people just don't do well with talk trauma. There's other things to do, EMDR, DBR, those types of things, the deep brain, switching things around, trying to get everything to change. So that's like one of the big things, especially those are the types of things we offer with the group that I'm a part of, co-founded with Stacia Wills, is Wardruna. So we do a lot of that to help people, not only the paranormal, but what we're talking about now with people that have kids going through this type of trauma, to hopefully maybe get them to help so we avoid them growing up to be this type of killer.
Now, how much of a mental, besides the physical and mental aspect of growing up just in general, but just people with mental issues, how much of a factor does that actually play into a serial killer?
There is, and we're going to probably cover a lot of that next week on next episode, really the breakdown of the psychological side of it. But really it does play a part in that. Again, it isn't necessarily a mental illness. Again, it's that mission-oriented thing we talked about, where we grow up, our father hates a certain person or our mother hates a certain person, and that's what you learn, and you grow up with it. You think that's normal, but if one of them, pisses you off, or three piss you off with little time in between, you become a serial killer because of that hate. But it's other things. Really, let's look at it differently. You're a product of what you grew up with. You think it's normal. Look at the case of Michael Vick, the quarterback. His family grew up fighting dogs. He thought it was normal, but when he became a public figure, we don't see that as normal. So, and that's where that comes in, that society thing, how we see things. And
Right.
he thought it was normal, but even in adulthood, you don't see it that way. Some kids, when the parenting part of it, the problems that you have, that's a big thing, and how that happens.
Yeah, it's definitely so. I mean, it's just, I think some of it, a lot of it's overlooked with some of the, like I said, the mental breakdown, the physical aspect of it, and how we were brought up. You're definitely 100% right with that. And you come to a point in life where you go right or left, and you choose to be good or bad from what you're standing at, or you'll have that mental break.
Yeah. Well, you're definitely right on that. I say this a lot, especially, being part of Wardruna and being a spiritual counselor. One of the things I always tell people that they have to face when they look in the mirror, you have two choices in life when you do have trauma and all that. Either you let it eat you alive, or you make the effort to overcome it. Which one do you want to do? That's all. Those are your two choices. Don't overcrowd it with added BS from all over the place. Those are your two choices. How are you going to face it? And that's the hard thing. That's the hard thing to face in the mirror. To tell yourself, do that deep down work, that shadow work, to see yourself in the mirror and what you're lacking, what that trauma is, to face it. Whatever way you have to do, like I said, talk therapy, or do the EMDR or the DBR and those types of things to help with that, to overcome that trauma. Because a lot of people, it's your upbringing and it's your traumas that happen that really lead to the aspect of fitting one of those patterns and having that catalyst to put you over the edge to do this type of killing. Of course, we all go through trauma. You know, again, some of us decide to overcome it. It's still there. You know, like I said, if we put a name to it, almost like if we're dealing in the paranormal, but me has a crisis management. One of the biggest things for crisis management is getting the name of the person that's creating the situation. When you have somebody's name or put a name to it, you have control over it.
Most definitely.
You have control, and that's always the biggest part, because that control also goes along with people that, you know, have addictions. Really look at it as an alcoholic. What do they say in their 12-step program? They always admit, I'm an alcoholic. They put a name to it. That way they could have those 12 steps of control over it. But even with our trauma, once we name the trauma, we grasp onto it. And I tell people a lot, when you grasp onto it, it's always there. We want to lessen it, like we do with EMDR or DBR or any of those types of methods. We lessen it. Even as an alcoholic, we have a shelf of, you know, compartmentalized things that have gone on in our life. We know it's there, but what we want to do is we want to let it collect dust. We've already acknowledged it. We know what it is. We're trying to overcome it. And the best way to overcome it, just like with a narcissist and all that, is don't give it the energy. Just put it on the side, let it collect dust.
Yeah, very, very, very true. Because you don't want to give it any more power to keep making it grow and fester and just become what it will become.
Yeah, it is, you know, and a lot of these, you know, these breakdowns that, you know, I've thrown out there and all that. I know a lot of people have probably heard some of this stuff before. It's just a different look at it. And more we're going to get into this even more as the weeks go on. And again, just the other disclaimer, there's a lot of stuff I'll talk about. Really, you know, there's going to be episodes where I get into how we look at a crime scene. Unfortunately, you know, just for professional courtesy, there might be some stuff I leave out. If you want to try and dig on your own, that's up to you. But you don't want to give away all the tricks of the trade, just in case somebody's watching that may not be the scrupulous one. And hopefully all the people watching are empathetic and good people, and you know, stay away from this stuff and want to do the greater good. But you never know. You never know who's watching, and you don't want to give away and give somebody the idea of how to get away with murder, of course. So.
Well, most definitely. I mean, we're hoping, like you said, everybody's a good-hearted person here is watching and willing to learn and wanting to learn to understand what this is all about. And I think you're doing a great job doing this. I mean, the way you profiled and just what you were talking about tonight, it's like, wow. I mean, it kind of gives me a different perspective of things, looking at things as well. It
is. We have to give people a different perspective. You know, this is ingrained in me. It's something that I do. It's hard, like I said, getting into this, it was hard for me to start the show because this is something that I just do. It's just something in my mind. I could look at something and know. And like I said last week, it's hard for me because being a shaman, but also being trained to do this work and applying it. Again, you could go to college all you want. You could read all you want on everything. You know, it's great going to college. It's just a piece of paper that says you know how to learn. It doesn't make you the be-all, end-all, unfortunately, because, you know, when you come out of it, when you apply it is where you really make the difference to help people and all that. We're in this work, and whether me being in the paranormal, whether me being true crime profiling, what I used to do, it's there to help people. It's help people educate them. It's to keep this stuff from happening. If you're not out there to do good and to help people learn and to avoid this stuff, I don't know if you're really applying what you learned. So that's important for people to know. And it's a big thing, and it's come my way a few times over the last couple of weeks. I just want people to know it's, you know, learn and apply. And applying meaning, you know, take into consideration when you're out and about, like something I do and my partner, we do all the time. I'll walk into a restaurant. In under 2 seconds, I'll tell you where all the exits are. I'll tell you people in the restaurant, who could help me, who can't help me, who is actually might be a problem.
Yep.
I just naturally do it. It's in my blood, you know, and it does stem from trauma. It does. It stems from trauma. We all have it. It's what we do with it. I decided to overcome it. That's what I decided to do.
It's kind of like some of us will never face the door backwards because we always want to see what's coming in.
Exactly. Yeah.
to
I always look at the
be.
door. I
Oh
don't
yeah,
sit in a restaurant without seeing the door or some door.
yeah.
It's important. I have to be able to profile instantaneously. And again, I appreciate everybody watching. I hope they're getting a lot from it. So it's hard for me to really break it all down, what my mind thinks in a split second, and break it down into episode after episode. And I really appreciate it. And hopefully everybody gets the feedback, asks enough questions, because sometimes this old brain needs a little kick in the ass to come up with some stuff to be able to share with you. And Sean, I really appreciate, a lot of the questions that you're asking. So that keeps us going and all. And I know in the next few episodes, once we get through a lot of this, we'll start having some guests on, giving their feedback. And it's always good to have people on, give their perspective,
Right.
because again, my perspective is my perspective. I could show you guys this stuff, give you a little of the breakdown, but my life experience is much different than other people's life experience. I could look at something from a life experience and be able to look at something and say, hey, this might be a clue to help solve this crime, where somebody else might look at it differently, and it might delay it or maybe speed it up. I don't know. It is that type of thing. It's hard. You're applying something that you learned and using your life experience, which helped me when I worked in the prison system, being a shaman and being able to sense things before they happen. Sometimes I had that crossover. It's like, okay, is this my spirit guide telling me, or is this my training telling me, or is this my trauma telling me something's about to happen? Is that inner voice and all that? It's the struggle I had between the three. Is it my training? Is it just my gut feeling from trauma, that spidey sense of being an empath,
Right.
or just the shaman side of it, where my spirit voices are coming through to let me know, hey, be careful, or hey, look at this. And before going through this in the professional field, nobody knew that I was a shaman or anything like that. You can't say stuff like that when you're in a law enforcement type of field. I've been out of it since 2007. So it's nice to be able to come on here and be able to, say that. Some of my the officers that I used to work with follow me on Facebook, and they're dumbfounded. They never knew. And, you have to keep those things close to the vest. Doing this type of work, you don't want people to know too much about you, especially in the prison system. You don't want anybody to know anything about you. That stuff gets used against you, especially if an inmate hears it.
Oh, yeah.
24/7 to get one over on you. So that's the battle of profiling, knowing information on certain inmates, even on other officers and all that. You had to know what you were dealing with, and just quickly profiling people, unfortunately, in a greater good way of protection, not in a bad one. Some people do. Profiling for hate reasons and all that, but more of profiling to keep yourself safe, your family safe, your loved ones around you safe. So hopefully this show is going to help people with that quite a bit. And again, I appreciate everybody watching. Of course, I'll answer everybody back that said hi earlier, and we'll get into all that. But do you have any other questions on there, Sean?
I will definitely say this. I definitely enjoyed watching the show tonight. I definitely think it's very informational for sure. I think a lot of people need to sit back and start listening to things like this so they can start understanding, because a lot of things that happen can be explained. And if you're watching out for it, or get to understand why people are doing this, or see a sign of why, or something come up, or a warning, that's helping somebody out. You could be saving somebody's life as well.
Just takes one. Just takes one life to save, to change the trajectory of what people's life pattern is and all that. It's there. If one of us could do that, and if one person watching right now saves their life, then the show's worth doing. I'm glad that that's going to happen. But, kind of in closing, again, if you missed the first episode, watch it again. If you missed some of the history we're talking about, it's always interesting. Again, watch this episode again. Be ready for next week, and I'll be putting out what topic will be very soon. But most of all, again, I want to thank All Access Network Television for airing this. Of course, you, Sean, for filling in tonight. I always like seeing your ugly mug there, so it's always fun to see it. Another bearded brother. Yeah. And just so everybody knows, a lot of this stuff, if you ever want to ask even more questions, I'm going to be all over the country, especially speaking with Wardruna, our healing society. especially about stuff like this, just healing and all that. But we're going to be all over the place. We'll especially the ones that I run as the Shaman and the Showman. The Connecticut Paracon is going to be July 11th. Tickets are on www.paracon.org. So make sure you catch up with that. And then also, we're going to be speaking at a lot of different places. Cleveland Paracon, New Orleans Paracon, we're going to be at the Hollow Paracon in New Jersey, the Underworld Culture Con there in Scranton, Pennsylvania. The list goes on and on. So we'll be at other places, may not be speaking, but still spreading the word about Wardruna. And Salem Paracon this year, of course, will be coming up, our Connecticut Witch Fest. So we're going to be all over the place. It's going to be fantastic. And I see Gwen's trying to say something here.
Yeah,
so,
Gwen.
Yeah, she's going to re-air both episodes tomorrow back to back. Appreciate that. I know I'm kind of in the darkness right now. I didn't know how to turn the light on in this lovely Florida house that we're at in the middle of Florida, an undisclosed location. Make it mysterious for you guys. But again, thanks everybody for watching. And I so much appreciate again, all you watching. Hopefully all of us in a collective at least could save 1 or 2 lives just by the information that I've learned over the years that I want to pass on to all you guys. And again, much appreciation. And much appreciation to Gwen there in the background, re-airing the episode so that way you guys are up to date. Next week, I think we're going to really get into the mind next week. We're really going to break down the psychological disconnect with some of these people and how that transpires from what happens in youth and how they're diagnosed and, what types of psychological problems, damage with the brain and all that might be part of why some of these people do what they do. So we'll be doing that next week. Again, I want to thank Methodical Management, my manager, and Historically Haunted for promoting all this, All Access Network Television. Of course, all of our events with the Shaman and the Showman, and we're going to see you guys all on the road too. But again, make sure you tune in next week for Profiled, but also all the episodes that are on Historically on the All Access Network Television. Of course, go see Adam's show on Historically Haunted podcast too. Let's just keep everybody going, more about the paranormal, of course, and especially about true crime and the act of profiling. I think we'll see you guys next week. And of course, at the end of the show, like I always say in all my different TikToks and stuff like that, I thank you guys, and let's go down the rabbit hole again, and we'll see you next week.
All righty. Everybody have a great night, and keep up the great work, Thomas.
All right. Appreciate you, my friend.
Have a nice night, everyone.